Okay, class, this is a tutorial about how to use transitions to create buttons in the actual code. So I gave you a startup file. I'm going to be using brackets today. What I'm going to do is I take my root folder, which is named transitions, and I'm going to drop it into that left sidebar. And we already have an index and a CSS page connected for you. So we have a starting file because this is a little, we're starting to get a little bit more advanced. So let's start in the HTML. And in the HTML, we're going to set a couple properties and then jump to our CSS because these are linked together. They go together. We have content in the HTML and then style in the CSS. So in our body section, I'm going to make two columns because our goal is to have 6 buttons by the end of this. So I'm going to do a div, class equals left, and I'm going to do another one that's div, class equals right. So I'm going to make 2 columns essentially. And this is always a good review to learn 2 columns again. Whenever I have a closed div, I always comment that this is closing the left, because sometimes you get a lot of different closing tags for divs and it gets confusing. So now we know we have 2 columns, one for left, one for right. And I'm going to jump over to my style and give them some parameters. So whenever I have a class, I use the period left squiggly squiggly and period right squiggly squiggly. So here's our 2 classes. Now we can give them a little bit of some parameters here. I'm just going to give them a width of 50% because it's 2 columns. I'm going to float the left to the left. And I'm going to text align center, so the buttons will be center within that column. Do the same for the right. I'm going to give it a width of 50%, half of my page. I'm going to float to the right, and I'm going to do text align center. So there we have 2 columns, and we can test that out to make sure it works. If I put some copy in each one of those divs or boxes, however you want to look at it, and we'll hit the preview, and you can see we have 2 columns. So we're ready to rock and roll. All right, so jumping back here, we had a whole lecture about transitions and how they're created, so now we can actually utilize them. So I'm going to start with my left, and I'm just going to do 2 with you online today, and you'll can kind of take it from there. So how I'm going to set these up is I'm going to create a link. So a link is the A active, A href, and these really don't have to go anywhere because this is for an example. So I'm going to put a pound sign in. A pound sign will still have the same effect as if you put, about.html or twitter.com or whatever, wherever you want this to go, but it physically goes nowhere. So pound is a nice way to, as a placeholder until you actually figure out where something's going to link to. And I'm going to have the text of the button say click here for all 6 of these. And if I test this out, you can see kind of just making sure this functions, that we know it's a button, it has that blue default, it's underlined standard, and I have the hand when I'm on the hover. And if I click on it, I don't go anywhere because it's just a dead end, essentially. So now that we have that, I'm going to give this a class so we can kind of make this one special compared to the rest of the buttons we're going to have. And I'm just going to call this button 1. Then I'm going to go over to my style, and I'm going to do A button 1. So this is a link, an A active, linked up with the class. So they're kind of attached together, as you can see back here, that the A and the button 1 is attached to the A, so that's why in our CSS we have it attached in this way. This would not work because this means there's a class within a link. It has to be no space bar. And in here I'm going to do this again, and this time I'm going to have a hover state. So right away we have our regular state and then we have our rollover state. for button 1. Now we can give it some parameters like we've been discussing. So one of the first things I always do is text decoration none, so it doesn't have that underline. Since these are buttons, and I think about buttons, I think about that they have a little bit of mass. So I'm going to give it some padding, maybe 20 pixels on the top and bottom and 30 pixels on the left and right. Let's give it a font weight. We can do a ton with fonts, right? We can do a font color. And for now, I'm just going to make it white. I'm going to do a background color. Now, here's my trick with background color that I think is really helpful. So if I just say background and I'm going to do blue, what I can do is in brackets, I can control click on the word blue and hit quick edits. And here, what I can do is change it from a hex number to RGBA. And RGBA is red, green, blue, alpha. And I can actually adjust the transparency. So this is a really great way to, instead of using the opacity parameter, which would do opacity for everything in the button, this is just for the background color. So I'm going to choose a color here and hit that X. So you can see here my background color now is RGBA 0055.7, so 77% opacity. And what else do we want to do here? How about if we do a text shadow? And this is a great chance to kind of play around with all different CSS3. So text shadow works the same way as it does in Photoshop, that we have the blur and then the X and Y. And I'm going to do, again, for my text shadow, I'm going to do RGBA 0, 0, 0. And again, you're going to be doing your own. So I'm just kind of giving you some, I feel like I have too many O's here. There we go. So RGB and then alpha, semicolon. Text shadow, what else can we play with? How about like border, radius, which would make it a rounded rectangle, which is always fun. How rounded do you want it? And lastly, this is going to help you to make them line up correctly in your columns. I'm going to put display inline block. So they're going to stay inline, but they are going to be a blocked element. All right, let's take a look at that. I don't know, we just put a lot of stuff in there, and I think that's what I want you to do, is just play around with it. Get some, all right, we have a nice blue button. We don't have any hover yet, but you can see we have text in there. We could change the font. We could add some letter spacing. Really explore CSS3 about what you can do here. Now let's do the hover state. So the hover state right now, let's take a couple of these. So I'm going to change this from the color, the background, maybe these 4. I'm going to change the color. When it rolls over, it's going to be black. The background's going to go from 77 to 30%. Text shadow will go to 0. We'll lose the text shadow. Let's see how weird this gets if we take down the border radius. So what we kind of have is all these things that are changing on the rollover from the original state. And if I come over and take a look at that, and we can see right now it's like the on and off button, right? We have on, off, on, off. And it has that big jump, which, yeah, we have a nice rollover there. But remember our transitions now. We can come over here and add transition all, since we're doing it to several different rules. And it's going to take 1 second, and I'm going to have it ease in. I'm not going to put any delay, so I'm going to just put a semi. And what we have to do here is then do all our prefixes, but let's just make sure this works and we are. And now, ooh, we have a nice smooth, it's like a dimmer that's switching on. Kind of nice. I don't really like this switching to black, so I'm going to just get rid of that. Now I can actually play with the aesthetics, and I could stay here all day and just kind of play with these little effects that can be super fun, but we won't for the time of this tutorial. So what I have to do now is go back, and remember you want this one, the original state that we just put the transition to be the last one. The order is relevant, and I'm going to put 3 above. I'm just going to put a little white space only so you can see the difference here. And we're going to start with the WebKit. Spell it right. WebKit, Moz, and what's the last one? Opera. Now we could do one more, which would be the MS for Microsoft. Internet Explorer, and now we have that all set that we could use this on our phone and it would work. We could use it on an iPad. We could, you know, this kind of makes this 88% available, which is kind of great. So let's just test that out one more time, and it works wonderful. All right, so let's do one more button and then I'll let you keep going and do this a little bit more. So for this one, I'm going to come back here to my index and I'm going to put 2 breaks in between, 2 BRs, so we have a little bit of space. I'm going to copy that first button, and this time I'm going to change the class from button 1 to button 2. And this is how you would continue on. Come back to my CSS, and we're going to set these. So underneath here, I'm going to set a new one for A period button 2, squiggly squiggly, A period button 2 colon hover for the rollover state, and I can do the same thing again. A lot of these we're going to bring over in some way. I know I'm going to bring over this display inline box. What else do we want to bring around? I will do for this one, oh, we could do a font size, which is always nice. So if I could do, let's say our font size here will be 18 pixels. I'll do a font family of Helvetica. And I'll then say Arial second choice, and then sans serif is my third choice for my fonts. And then, let me just hit enter so you can see this a little bit better. And I'll also then over here do font size 24. Now what this will do is actually make our entire button larger, which is somewhat nice. I'm going to do padding 30 pixels all the way around. We can do a background of a hex number. I have a nice green color. And let's just see what we're like right now. Okay, not too bad. It's just going to jump bigger, so it kind of pops open. It's not smooth, right? It's on or off. I want to get rid of text decoration and make it white quick, and then I won't. And then here I will change the color to be gray. Now what we can do is add our transition. So I'm going to take that exact same transition here, bring it to the A period button 2, paste it in, and the one thing I'm going to change a couple things. I want this to ease out so we can kind of do this a little bit different. We want them to be different, or what's the point? And why don't we make this a little bit longer. Let's go longer. Short, sometimes nice too, depending what you have. Perfect, that looks a lot better. So now we have a nice blend into one to the other. That looks really nice. So in and out, notice how it comes in, and then when we roll over, it goes out. So unlike this one that switches and jumps back. So that's kind of a nice way to go in and out. Doesn't that feel a lot smoother? So play around with this some more. 6 buttons, different fun, creativity, think outside the box. This is a great one to keep around in the future that you can kind of pull from and use in your projects.